Hello. Today I'd like to read the fifth and final, the last of my contributions to Britain and Japan biographical portraits. This is actually to volume 7. This is the paperback. It's quite a thick one, as you can see. This is chapter 33 from page 443 as far as page 455. That includes the endnotes. Okay, so this one is about an architect, which is a little bit different to my usual line of work, as it were, but he does have a connection with Kyushu Institute of Technology, Q-Tech, where I have worked for 28 years. So that's part of the reason why I wrote about him. Probably a large part. Okay, so Tatsuno Kingo, 1854 to 1919, a leading architect of the Meiji Era. And here is there's a photograph. Oh, sorry. Yeah, let's see if there we are. There he is. Tatsuno Kingo was born on the 13th of October, 1854, into the Karatsu clan in the small but attractive castle town of Karatsu on the north coast of what is now Saga Prefecture in Kyushu, noted for its Korean-influenced pottery and the annual festival called Karatsu Kunchi. He was the second son of the Himematsu family, but following common practice was adopted into the Tatsuno family, which lacked an heir. Both families had come to Karatsu in 1818 from Aizu in northern Honshu, with the head of the neighboring Ogasawara clan. Further back in history, the Tatsuno family had originated in the village of that name in present-day Nagano Prefecture and moved to Aizu in 1643. The Karatsu clan had been slow in adapting to the Meiji Restoration, but in 1870 it opened an English school called the Yo-Gakko, School for Western Learning. This was soon closed, but during its brief existence, Tatsuno Kingo and others who would play leading roles in the Meiji period were educated there. One of these was Takahashi Korekiyo, 1854 to 1936, a classmate of Tatsuno and later a president of the Bank of Japan, finance minister and prime minister, who taught Tatsuno English. Study in Tokyo, 1873 to 1879. In 1873, Tatsuno was one of the first students at the newly opened engineering college, the Imperial College of Engineering, ICE, or Kogakuryo, from 1877, called the Kobu Daigakko, of which the principal was Henry Dyer. He learned English first from an Englishman named Morris. Most of the professors selected by Dyer were from the British Isles. They included Edward Divers, chemistry, David Marshall, physics, William Craigie, English, John Milne, geology, John Perry, engineering, and William Ayrton, physics and telegraphy. I have written about Ayrton as well. So this is probably not the last one of my contributions to Britain and Japan biographical portraits. Gosh, must find it. In 1879, Tatsuno was one of the first graduates of the Building Engineering Department, Zo-ka-gakka, of the Kobu Daigakko, where he was a student for 2 years of the talented young British architect and teacher Josiah Conder, 1852 to 1920, that's C-O-N-D-E-R, who had arrived in Japan in early 1877. In fact, Tatsuno was the top student of Conder's first class of 4 men, and was just 2 years younger than his professor. The other 3 were Katayama Tokuma, 1853 to 1917, Karatsu-born Sone Tatsuzo, 1853 to 1937, and Satachi Shichijiro, 1857 to 1922, all of whom left their mark on the Meiji architectural landscape. After graduating on 8th of November, 1879, Tatsuno Kingo married on the 1st of December that year, Toba Hideko, born 1863. They would later have a daughter and 2 sons. Their elder son, Tatsuno Yutaka, 1888 to 1964, became a noted scholar of French literature. On the 26th of December 1879, Kingo was ordered by the Ministry of Works, Kee-tah-kew-shoo, to go to Europe to complete his training as an architect. Tatsuno in England, 1880 to 82. Tatsuno went to England in a party of 11 outstanding ICE students, which included the noted chemist Takamine Jokichi, 1854 to 1922, who later produced Takadiastase, I'm not sure, and the telecommunications pioneer Shida Rinzaburo, 1855 to 92, later described by Lord Kelvin of Glasgow University as my finest student. They left Tokyo on 8th of February 1880, sailing from Yokohama in a French ship and transferring to another at Hong Kong. After 6 weeks, they reached Marseille, from where they traveled by train to Paris, crossed the Channel, and at last reached the Victoria Hotel, London. The party was welcomed by the then Japanese consul and student interpreter Mita Kitsuryo, and met Hugh M. Matheson, chairman of Matheson Company. They stayed together for about 2 weeks at a hotel near Finsbury Park before each student began his designated training. Kitsuryo might not be a correct reading. I've put a question mark against that. Tatsuno entered the Cubit, that's C-U-B-I-T-T, construction company, through the introduction of a paternal cousin of Kondor named Roger Smith, 1830 to 1903, a professor of architecture at London University, and trained there for 5 months. From September 1880, thanks to another introduction, this time from the Matheson Company, Tatsuno studied in London as an apprentice in the office of the noted Gothic revival architect William Burgess, that's B-U-R-G-E-S, 1827 to 81, who had trained Kondor at the Royal Institute of British Architects, RIBA. Yet while Kondor had learned mid-Victorian styles from Burgess, Tatsuno had less opportunity to learn these directly, as Burgess died in the following April. Instead, he apparently absorbed a style commonly, if misleadingly, known as Queen Anne, of which the foremost practitioner was Richard Norman Shaw, 1831 to 1912, designer of New Scotland Yard. Shaw coined the term himself to describe his very individual adaptation of 18th century styles, which he used in his designs for elegant townhouses. Oh, by the way, I'm not reading the endnotes. Observation and fieldwork in France and Italy, 1882 to 83. On completion of his apprenticeship, Tatsuno had the opportunity to visit France and Italy during 1882 to 83, and both broaden and deepen his first-hand experience of European architecture. There are sketches, apparently in pencil with brief notes in English, which Tatsuno did of parts of French and Italian buildings in Kogaku Hakashi Tatsuno Kingo Den, biography of Doctor of Engineering Tatsuno Kingo, hereafter Tatsuno Kingo Den, published in 1926. He visited and sketched at the Cluny, that's C-L-U-N-Y, Cluny Museum in Paris on the 31st of May, 1882, which was formerly a townhouse of the abbots of Cluny, started in 1334. And before we turn the page, here is a sketch by Tatsuno of a cornice of the Maison de Diane in Tatsuno Kingo Den. Here we are. Okay, he also sketched the brick chimney of a townhouse in Orléans on the 19th of July, noting, work before breakfast. In this case, bricks are rather thin so that they look like Roman tiles. 2 days later, in the same city, he produced a fine sketch labeled The Eve Cornice of the Maison de Diane, now an historical museum. That's the one I've just shown you. On the next day, he drew the roof of a well at the Musée Historique. On the 28th of July, he was at the Royal Château de Blois, noted for its octagonal spiral staircase, where he sketched interior woodwork, especially corbels, that's C-O-R-B-E-L-S. He must have spent some time at Blois, B-L-O-I-S, because on the 4th of August, he sketched a crenellated chimney at the castle and brackets. He wrote blackets with an L. Being a Japanese, he had trouble distinguishing L and R. And beams from an old house, including a cross-section. On the 20th of October, Tatsuno was at a place in Italy which he called Certosa, Certosa, meaning Carthusian monastery, probably the Certosa di Pavia in Lombardy, northern Italy. Here he sketched another chimney resembling in shape the top of the Campanile in the Piazza San Marco in Venice, from a monk's residence in the cloister, and noted, chimney constructed entirely by bricks and terracotta. The materials are all of red color. There are 24 houses for monks along the grand cloister, all of them being detached from one another except 2 of them which are connected. Each house has parlor, another room as hall, something like a corridor on the ground floor, and bedrooms above. Also, there is a small garden with a well. On the 28th of December, he produced a detailed sketch of a cornice from the Palazzo Riccardi in Florence, complete with gutter pipe, and on the 17th of January, another cornice of the Palazzo Strozzi. Tatsuno was carefully absorbing and recording European architectural styles in a kind of practical fieldwork, which would help to refine further what he had already learned in London, and so complete his education as an architect. For Tatsuno, seeing was indeed believing and discovering. Return to Japan, 1883 to 88. Returning to Japan in 1883, Tatsuno worked at the building and repair section of the Ministry of Works. The following year, he became a professor of the ICE after Konder left the college. He received his first private commission at the age of 30. This was for the design of a bank assembly hall for the businessman Shibusawa Eiichi, 1840 to 1931, which was completed in 1885. In 1886, he was a founder member of the Architectural Institute of Japan, Zoka Gakkai, renamed the Kenchiku Gakkai in 1897. In February 1886, he founded the Tatsuno Architectural Office in Tokyo, renting the second floor of a house in Kyobashi Ward, Yamashita-cho, owned by a screen mounter and picture framer, Kyojiya, named Matsushita Shogoro. It was the first such office in Japan. He was awarded a doctorate on the 7th of June, 1888. Trip to Europe via America, 1888 to 1889. In 1888, Tatsuno visited Britain for the second time. An interesting and full account by Tatsuno's assistant, Okada Tokitaro, 1859 to 1926, also from Karatsu, is recorded in Appendix 2 of Tatsuno Kingo Den, pages 53 to 71. After receiving the commission to design the Bank of Japan, BOJ, with a budget of 400,000 yen, later rising to 1.2 million yen, from Tomita Tetsunosuke, 1835 to 1916, second president of the bank, from the 21st of February 1888 to the 3rd of September 1889, Tatsuno left Yokohama with his assistants Okada and Sakurai Kotaro, 1870 to 1953, on the 18th of August for America. In New York, they met the then minister Mutsu Munemitsu, 1844 to 97, and saw public buildings in Boston. They sailed from New York for England on the Cunard Line's Umbria on the 10th of November. In Liverpool, they were met by the honorary consul, whom Okada called Bosu, James Lord Bowes, B-O-W-E-S, 1834 to 99, and inspected banks and grain houses. After 3 or 4 days, they moved to London, where Sakurai and Okada attended lectures on architecture at University College. Through the then Consul General, Sonoda Kokichi, the party were allowed to visit the Bank of England, but sketches were forbidden. Tatsuno was finally permitted to borrow the actual plans after he produced a 1/400th scale drawing based on a book from the 17th century and showed it to the bank's architect Owen. Okada was meanwhile introduced to William Cubitt Company by Hugh Matheson and began to work as an apprentice. In January 1889, Tatsuno traveled to continental Europe, leaving Okada and presumably Sakurai in London. But before I turn the page, again, this is Tatsuno in England, from Tatsuno Kingo Den. Finding the new Belgian Banque Nationale building, now the bank's museum at number 10 Rue de Bois Sauvage, Brussels, an excellent design, he summoned Okada to join him at the end of January. Okada met one of the two architects of the bank, Henri Beyaert, that's B-E-Y-A-E-R-T, 1823 to 94, depicted on the Belgian 100-franc note. He also traveled to Antwerp and saw Beyaert's celebrated triangular National Bank branch. On returning to London, Okada worked in the late William Burge's office. Tatsuno and Okada left London in August 1889, traveling via Paris, where they saw the newly constructed Eiffel Tower. They sailed from Marseille on the 25th of August. Sakurai seems to have remained in England to study at University College London. While this account is not Tatsuno's own and relies on Okada's memory, it is an important source for Tatsuno's second study trip to Europe. Back in Japan, 1889 to 1919. Tatsuno became Dean of the School of Engineering at the Imperial University and President of the Architectural Institute of Japan, AIJ, in 1898. He continued to hold the latter office until 1917, 2 years before his death, which occurred on the 25th of March, 1919. In 1903, at the age of 50, Tatsuno resigned his academic post and set up in private practice together with his partner, Dr. Kasai Manji from Morioka, 1863 to 1942. This was Japan's first architectural partnership. The practice was called Tatsuno Kasai Jimusho, literally Tatsuno Kasai Office, and was based in Tokyo. 2 years later, he established the Tatsuno Kataoka Jimusho with Dr. Kataoka Yasushi, 1876 to 1946, in Osaka. In Tatsuno Kingo Den, Part 3, Chapter 3, pages 47 to 91, there is a long list of Tatsuno's successfully completed architectural work, divided as follows: pre-1897 projects, projects completed by the Tatsuno Kasai Jimusho, projects completed by the Tatsuno Kataoka Jimusho, projects in which he was an advisor, and competitive tenders. The headings in each list are building name, place, construction materials, area measured in tsubo, approximately 1 tsubo is 3.3 square meters, year and month of construction, and notes. In the 5-year period from 1897 to 1902, Tatsuno was probably too busy with teaching and administrative duties at the university to accept any architectural work of his own. Of the pre-1897 projects which included consultation work, the first one listed is the above-mentioned brick-built assembly hall, Shu Kaijo, for the Bank of Tokyo in about 1884. The following years were very active, including a building for the Railways Board, Tetsudo Kyoku, at Toranomon, Tokyo, Inoue Masaru's official residence, part of a factory for Osaka Boseki Spinning Company, Shibusawa Eiichi's residence in Kabuto-cho, Tokyo, and the wooden Hizen Karatsu Primary School. In 1887 to 96, Tatsuno designed the main building for the Koka Daigaku Engineering College, the Yokohama Saibansho, the model for all courthouses in Japan, the Osaka Daiichi Ginko, the first bank building in Japan, and the stone-built Bank of Japan in 1896, etc. He also acted as an advisor on various projects, for example, the former Bank of Japan brick building in Tokyo's Eidan Bashi, which was Konda's design, but on which Tatsuno assisted while still a student in 1878, and the Post and Telegraph Ministry, Teishinsho, founded 1885 building in 1883 to 84. The Tatsuno Kasai Jimusho, which opened in August 1903 at Hiyoshicho, Nibanchi, Kyobashi Ward in Tokyo City, and began taking commissions from the general public for private houses. In August 1907, the office moved to Kojimachi Ward, Yaesucho 11, and was still there at the time of publication of Tatsuno Kingo Den. the list of projects in which Tatsuno was involved for the next 14 years until his death, either as architect or overseer, kantoku, runs to several pages. It is divided as follows: 1, companies and commercial buildings; 2, banks; 3, private houses and clubs; 4, school buildings and libraries; 5, railway stations; 6, theatres and halls; 7, factories and warehouses. The buildings cannot all be listed here, but some of the most important and interesting ones throughout Japan with their dates include the head office of the Tokyo Kasai Hoken Company Limited, that's fire insurance, 1905, and several other insurance companies, the Tokyo Rice Exchange, 1912, the Kyoto and Kobe branches of Daiichi Bank, 1906, the Iwate Prefectural Bank for Agriculture and Industry, 1914, the Kochi Bank, 1914, the 106th Bank in Saga, 1915, the Okayama 22nd Bank, 1916, a lounge for the garden of Marquis Nabeshima of Saga outside Tokyo, 1906, renovation of the Sanjo's residence, 1917, the school building and dormitory for the Meiji Senmon Gakko, now the Kyushu Institute of Technology in Fukuoka Prefecture, 1907 and 1910. That's where I have worked for 28 years. Toyama City Library, 1911, Hakodate City Library, 1914, various buildings for the Tokyo Imperial University, Busan Railway Station, 1907, Tokyo Station, work begun in 1914, Ryogoku Kokugikan, 1907, Nagoya Kokugikan, 1912, various work for the Tokyo Lighting Company, Yasuda Shoji Company, etc. The Tatsuno Kataoka partnership based in Osaka seems to have been almost as productive. In this case, the list of projects is divided as follows: 1, companies, exchanges, and convention halls; 2, banks; 3, theatres, variety theatres, yosei, and assembly rooms; 4, factories and warehouses; 5, official residences, kante, and private houses. As might be expected, most of the work was in the Kansai area, chiefly Osaka, then Kobe, and westwards as far as Kyushu. The Tobata Matsumoto-te residence, designed from 1909 until 1912, is last but certainly not least on the long list. Together with the Nara Hotel, it was one of the jewels, if not the crowning achievements, of the Osaka office. And the Nara Hotel is still functioning as a hotel these days. You can find it on Wikipedia, as you can also the Matsumoto-te. Okay, 3 noteworthy buildings designed by Tatsuno. Buildings which Tatsuno designed include 3 particularly noteworthy ones, each with entirely different functions, among a host of architecturally significant edifices which have survived earthquakes and Second World War bombs. The Bank of Japan, 1896, Tokyo Station, 1914, and the Matsumoto-te, 1912, in Tobata Ward, Kee-tah-kew-shoo, now the West Japan Industrial Club or Nishihon Kogyo Club. Taking the buildings in reverse order, the third one is a mainly Art Nouveau style building with a Japanese residence attached and set in a large Japanese style garden. It is Tatsuno's only remaining house, a designated important cultural property, Juyo Bunkazai, and still functions as a club. It is open twice yearly to the general public. Matsumoto Kenjiro, 1870 to 1963, who commissioned the residence and lived there, was an industrialist who had studied at Pennsylvania University and whose wealth was based originally on the nearby coal mines at Tagawa. He had founded the above-mentioned Meiji Senmon Gakko in 1907, now Kyushu Institute of Technology, or Q-Tech, a short walk from his grand house, to educate gentlemen well-versed in technological skills. In Japanese, Gijutsu ni kanno naru shikunshi. Not tanno, but kanno. The vast Tokyo station may be regarded as the Japanese version of a triumphal monument such as the Arc de Triomphe in Paris or Berlin's Siegessäule. It was built not only for practical reasons, but also to celebrate victory in the Russo-Japanese War, 1904-5, and although it remains a substantial landmark building, it seems suitably restrained and modest to fulfill this purpose. for the war was won at a dreadful cost in both lives and finance. Japan did not get everything it wanted from the Treaty of Portsmouth. 5th of September 1905, and initially there were nationwide riots when the peace settlement was announced, even though national independence and international respect, mingled, it must be noted, with some fear and suspicion, were thereby ensured. Goto Shinpei, 1857 to 1929, formerly a colonial administrator in Formosa, Taiwan as we say now, and chief of the South Manchurian Railway, as a cabinet member and president of the Railways Agency, Tetsudo-in, gave his wholehearted backing to Tatsuno's design, which has withstood the test of time. Before we go on, I'll just show you, here's a photograph, it's actually my photograph of the garden, well, the Matsumoto residence from the garden there on the left. Or is it the right? I can't tell. Okay. The Bank of Japan's old building, so-called to distinguish it from the adjacent new building and annex, is located a short walk from Tokyo Station. It is described on the bank's website, which provides a useful virtual tour in Japanese and English, as one of the best examples of Western-style architecture in the Meiji era, together with the Gei-Hinkan State Guest House in Akasaka, designed by Katayama Tokuma, built in 1909. That's also in Tokyo, Akasaka. It was also the first important Western building in Tokyo designed by a Japanese architect, and was massively reinforced by British steel against fire and earthquakes. The BOJ's old building, Kyukan, is an important cultural property and an icon which appears regularly in the news, just like its precursor, the even more fortress-like and imposing Bank of England, with its great windowless curtain wall designed by Sir John Soane, 1753 to 1837. Yes, I have visited the Bank of Japan old building, and certainly it's an impressive structure, and the British steel is much in evidence. Here we are, more detail. The old building is in neo-Baroque style, combining Baroque pillars and dome with orderly placing of windows after the Renaissance manner. Tatsuno's design, as explained above, certainly owes some inspiration to the old Belgian National Bank building, though exactly how much is a matter for debate among specialists. The former banking floor at ground level is shown on the website with photographs of decorative wall moldings and elaborate bronze capitals for the pillars. The building used to contain Japan's second oldest lift or elevator, but it has been replaced. The greenish dome is a fine feature in the center of the building. The cast iron stairs were imported by Tatsuno from Britain in 1896 and are beautifully wrought. There is also an interior courtyard used for loading and unloading when customers of the bank transported money by horse or cart, and it is claimed that the watering station for horses still works. Assessment of Tatsuno's work. Tatsuno Kingo was the most influential Japanese architect of his day. It is probably no exaggeration to say that he was the mastermind and guiding hand behind much of the Western-style architecture of Meiji Japan. His importance to the Meiji state in its quest to earn respect from Western powers through imitation of their buildings, and thereby to enter the so-called Comity of Civilized Nations, more or less a club of the great powers, cannot be overemphasized. In most advanced societies, both ancient and modern, architecture is, or perforce becomes, a political and economic statement of national power and wealth. And the Meiji oligarchs were clearly well aware of this from the day they commissioned Kondo to design the two-story Rokumeikan, the Hall of the Baying Stag, or Deer Cry Pavilion. This building was completed in the French Renaissance style in 1883 and officially opened with 1,200 distinguished foreign and Japanese guests on the 28th of November 1883 by Foreign Minister Inoue Kaoru, who was determined to use all available means to ensure that the unequal treaties were revised. So it was intended to impress the foreigners. Tatsuno was both prolific and eclectic within the Western tradition in his building style. The so-called Tatsuno Shiki, Tatsuno style, which he often employed, was a combination of red brick and white stone in decorative patterns, which owed much to the styles he had learned in London. A good example of this is the Mizuho Bank Central Branch in Kyoto, built as the Daiichi Ginko in 1906. He also seemed to favor dormer windows, including merely decorative ones, as roof ornaments. For example, Hamadera Koen Station, Sakai near Osaka in 1907, and the Meiji Senmon Gakko School Building, 1907, and Matsumoto Residence, 1912. It is said that Tatsuno produced almost 200 Western-style structures, of which 38 were banks. Some of the buildings have not survived the ravages of time, but others have been wholly or partially reconstructed. For example, the Nihon Saibu Ginko Bank's frontage can be admired by tourists inside the new Kaikyo drama ship building near to where it once stood at Moji Port, now part of Kee-tah-kew-shoo. While it is unfortunate that, according to Professor Fujimori Terunobu, born in 1946, not many of Tatsuno's plans and drawings on paper survive, those buildings which remain tell their own story of his remarkable talent and industry. In a unique and highly personal tribute to Tatsuno, Goto Keiji, 1883 to 1919, himself a graduate of the architecture course of Tokyo Imperial University and an architect of distinction in a quasi-medieval style, painted a picture titled Tatsuno Kingo Hakashi Sakuhin Shusei Ezu, collected works of Dr. Tatsuno Kingo, which included many of Tatsuno's major buildings in styles including Gothic, Baroque, Renaissance, and Art Nouveau, gathered together to make an imaginary city which is undeniably European in appearance and resembles London or Rome to some extent. This work is in the possession of the Tatsuno family and was presented to Tatsuno by devoted pupils and associates on his 60th birthday, his kanreki. It was exhibited in 2008 at Tatsuno's Akarenga Bunkakan, Red Brick Culture Hall, formerly the Nihon Seimei Company's Kyushu branch office in Fukuoka City, his only extant insurance building. The most detailed historical account to date in Japanese of Tatsuno Kingo's life is contained in the above-mentioned Tatsuno Kingo Den, published in 1926 by the Tatsuno Kasai Jimusho. Among many items of interest, there is an undated letter from Josiah Konder in English. He had apparently been requested to give an assessment of Tatsuno for a periodical on architecture, probably that of the Architectural Institute of Japan, AIJ. Konder begins by explaining that he would not like silence on his part to be misunderstood when others are praising Tatsuno. All of his teachers were, and here we quote from Konder, were impressed with his ability and sterling qualities. He very soon attained distinction and has very worthily and energetically maintained his position of a leading architect in Japan. His career and the numerous works that he has accomplished are too well known to need recapitulation from me. I must say, however, that with all his success, he has never forgotten his early connections, and I have received many kindnesses and attentions from him. Dr. Tatsuno was earnest and uncompromising in the pursuit of his profession, and in these days, when the successful architect has to compromise and give way to things somewhat against his convictions, the fact that he holds the leadings, query that, testimony to his high ability. Such a glowing appraisal was surely not given lightly by an architect and educator of the caliber of Konder, and is joined by many other eulogies from high-ranking Japanese friends, national and local government officials, fellow academics and professionals, mourning Tatsuno's passing in the same book. Naturally, a memorial volume produced by Tatsuno's own office would not say anything negative, but the quantity and quality of the praise offered is nevertheless striking, and there can be no doubt that he played a pivotal and pioneering role in Japan's modernization, westernization, through his contributions, both directly and indirectly through his pupils. We may therefore reasonably conclude that if Josiah Konder has been fairly described as the father of Japanese architecture, then Tatsuno Kingo, as his best pupil, was indeed not merely a, but the leading Japanese architect of the Meiji era. And that's the end of my biographical portrait of Tatsuno Kingo, except for the end notes, which I have not read here. It is available. This is available also on Q-Tech's repository, and I can give the link in the description below. Okay, I think that is, as I said, not the last of my biographical portraits. I think I've got one of William Ayrton in there somewhere, so I'll have to hunt through the 10 volumes of biographical portraits to find that one as well. But for now, anyway, thank you very much. Goodbye, and I'll see you again soon.